Org.
Washington Journal continues.
Join me in welcoming Congressman Kevin Brady, Republican of Texas, to the Washington Journal table this morning. He is a member of the House Ways and Means Committee and also the Joint Economic Committee. Thanks for being
Morning,
with us.
Susan.
Yesterday, the head of the Congressional Budget Office, Douglas Elmendorf, testified before the National Commission on Fiscal Responsibility and Reform about the estimates on the U.S. debt. Here is the reporting on it in today's Financial Times. Watchdog appeals for urgency in tackling debt. Douglas Elmendorf said that under a relatively optimistic scenario that involved little changes to current law, U.S. debt would rise from 62% of GDP this year to about 80% of GDP in 2035. But under an alternative scenario in which several changes were made by lawmakers, including the extension of the tax cuts pushed through under the Bush administration, the U.S. debt could hit 185% of GDP by 2035. In addition, he said that CBO projections might understate the severity of high debt levels, understate them over the long term, since it could lead to higher interest rates and slower growth. What's that all mean to you?
It is over-optimistic. I think the debt is in a much more serious position than that. And each day we seem to add to it. It's one of the parts of the debate on the unemployment benefits you just got done visiting with callers about. And I think it's having a real impact on the economy. There's this economic train of thought that's been proven. It's called rational expectation. People know what's coming, and so they adjust their behavior now. And I think one of the reasons consumer confidence is so far down right now, it continues to decrease, is that people look at all this debt. They know it's not healthy for the economy. They know it's not healthy for the budget. They know someone's going to have to pay it back, and so as a result, they're pocketing. They're holding on the cash they have. The savings rates continue to grow. They're not making those purchases. Businesses are worried about who's going to have to pay it back. They're also worried about a host of other policy decisions up here, and as a result, it's really, I think, one of the main reasons our economy is so sluggish right now.
Can you tell our viewers what 62%, which is what it's estimated to be by this year, what that really means for the average family? What's the correlation?
Well, here's an example. Just paying back the bailouts and stimulus to a college student graduating this year, it means that their share is about $145,000 monthly out of their paycheck, and what they have to pay back is equivalent of a second car payment. That's for a young person starting out in life. So there's a real impact to this debt. But overall, we look at the world and we look at countries' financial health, and we compare how much they owe to the size of the economy. We're at 62% today. We're right in the middle of those 5 or 6 European countries who are facing debt problems. We're smack in the middle of it. As we continue to grow, we move into that tier, not to the Greek level necessarily, but close to it over the next 2 or 3 or 4 years. So what it means is the rest of the world has less confidence in us. It costs more to borrow money. The budget doesn't go further up here. They look to tax people or cut services. So, yeah, it has a real impact on a family.
You mentioned that you were listening in our green room to the callers in the last segment, and you know the scope of the problems.
Yeah.
The millions of people are long-term unemployed, houses that are underwater that they can't sell to move. So what's the prescription for the way forward?
I think the main focus has to be on job creation. Unemployment benefits, I think, are a stopgap measure, but most people are pushing us to get this economy going again. And so far, I think the unemployment bill itself has been played with a lot of political games, unfortunately. The debt is a real crisis, and Republicans are just asking that we not add $34 billion more to it. So far, the bill's been attached to a lot of other spending. Just recently did they start offering it as a standalone bill, but the focus has to be on jobs and issues like the debt, issues like higher energy taxes, higher taxes, period. All that adds to, again, sort of a stop sign on new job creation, and that's ought to be a focus as well.
So how do you create jobs?
One, I think you need to stop frightening the horses. Businesses right now are not making that critical investment decision, rehiring workers or hiring new ones, because they're afraid they'll be punished for it. They do look at cap and trade as raising energy prices. They look at all the new tax proposals up here from gosh, from higher income taxes to higher capital gains, dividend taxes, regulatory proposals, and they say, we're worried about hiring someone back. Let's hold off for a while longer. And I think until we stop frightening them and take some of those proposals off the table, we won't see the job creation we saw in the Reagan recovery, for example. I also think that that across-the-board tax cuts on business, 20% across-the-board tax cut for small businesses where there is certainty, and then with customers coming back to debt, I do think if Washington really got serious with a game plan on getting back to a balanced budget, to where the public realized, look, this isn't going to get worse, and it is continuing to get worse, I think it would have some impact on consumer confidence. And the day businesses want customers, they don't see them.
I'm already getting questions by Twitter, so we'll get them on the air by call, but about paying for the war when we've got so many other fiscal priorities. So would you tell people what your opinion is on not just the war, but our overall level of defense spending compared to some of our major allies?
Well, we are, there is no comparison. You know, the United States, I think our defense budget is higher than the next 20 countries total. We are so strong on national security, both for the United States and across this world. One of the reasons I think the world has been more stable than it might otherwise have been. We're far more secure than we might otherwise have been after 9/11. I think we have to keep those defenses up. His history shows every time we think, you know, things are settled worldwide, we let our guard down. There is another threat, we rebuild again. I think we're determined not to do that, and I think that's the right thing to do.
Well, let's start taking some phone calls for you. We're going to begin with a call from New Albany, Indiana. This is John on our independent line for Congressman Brady. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning. I understand that we have issues in this country. You know, I worked most all my life and have never drawn unemployment up until this moment. And I've been off work for a year. The company I work for closed down. And for you guys to sit here and say that, well, we can't find the money, but, you know, for 8 years you found money to start wars and do all these other things and give money to the oil companies and all these other companies and turned around who left this country anyway. And yet, here we are, you guys are going on vacation. I'm unemployed. I got a family to feed and take care of. I'm about to lose my apartment because you guys can't get off your butts and do what's right by the American people.
John, tell us a little bit more about your situation. What kind of work were you in?
I was working for a furniture company.
Furniture company? And are they closed for good?
Yes, they closed their doors.
And did the business move out of overseas, or it's just out of business?
No, they stayed. They're still here in the area, but they closed down one of their plants, and I was the last one in, first one out. And
so what will you do next?
I was working maintenance.
So you've got maintenance skills. Are you going to be looking for another job? Are there prospects there?
I'm looking for work. There's jobs here. There's little small jobs here, but they're all temporary jobs that last for 2-3 months. I'm interviewing for jobs, but the problem is there's so many people here interviewing for the same jobs that it's really difficult. It's really difficult. You people pretend like there's not people out here looking for work. Everybody's looking for work. Everybody's looking for work. You know, and just throw everybody off the rolls like that, just arbitrarily throw everybody off because you can't find the money to pay for it, and you guys sticking things to the unemployment money. I mean, come on. You know, it's just wrong. And I can't understand how you can sit here and look us in the face and say, hey, you know, we're doing the best we can. No, you're not doing the best you can.
John, I'm going to jump in at this point, and thank you very much. Good luck to you in your job search in New Albany.
Well, absolutely. I think John's in a position a lot of people are, especially those who were new hires and laid off once the recession took hold. But I actually agree with one key point. He said, you tell me you can't find the money for this, and he's right. And that's what we're asking for, that this be paid for. There is, I think, a host of ways to cut money that is less of a priority than this. For example, the stimulus bill, only less than half of it's been spent so far. Too much of it wasted. We've seen, what was it, $3 million for a turtle crossing in Florida, $50,000 spent for a hand puppet grant in the $390,000 University of New York Buffalo on a study between smoking marijuana and malt liquor beer. Just ridiculous uses of our tax dollars. And John's question, you tell me you can't find the money for it. The money is here, but so far people are unwilling to look at the cuts to pay for the benefits that John and others are waiting for. That's our point. Let's pay for this.
One earlier communicant, I'm sure it was an email at the point, suggested that we should raise the unemployment tax for companies.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, what do you think?
And I think the point they made is that people would be less likely to lay off workers. Just the opposite. Companies will be less likely to hire them in the first place. Companies do math, and when they're hiring people, do we have enough customers in sales to support this person? But if the cost of that person keeps going up because of the insurance taxes, other regulation, they're not going to hire them in the first place. So it's unfortunately one of those vicious cycles. The more you raise unemployment tax, the less people are hired in the first place, the higher unemployment is. So in real business sense, it doesn't work, unfortunately.
Our next caller is Timothy, Republican from Cecil County, Maryland. Good morning, Timothy. Welcome. Timothy, you there?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I would like to start out by saying that I'm 43 years old, and I've been a Republican all my life. But I'm going to take a page out of the Republicans' own playbook. I suggest that all Americans vote Democrat come November, because I think it is totally sad how they just are so against our president that they think the answer is just to vote no on every bill that comes upon them. They just shoot it down, shoot it down, and shoot it down. And it's sad, because all these people that are out of unemployment now, including myself as of June, and now I have no unemployment. I have a family to feed. I work construction. I can't find a job. Since January the 20th this year, I had to do 2 job contacts per week to keep my unemployment. I have 93 resumes, applications, and interviews, and have not found a job. It's unfair to say that these people are just taking this money and not doing anything about it, when the majority of the people are actually trying to find gainful employment. And here, once again, last night, for some reason, they vote no and didn't extend the unemployment again. What do they think that they're accomplishing when they got to go to the polls and run for re-election?
Let me ask a process question.
Yeah.
This viewer tweets, why do GOP members think of unemployment as some handout people pay into it when employed as insurance for if they become unemployed? How does it work?
I wonder who's saying that it's a handout, because I was there for the debate on all those, on every version of this bill, and I didn't hear that voiced once, either publicly in the well of the House or privately. I think all members of Congress understand how tough it is when you're out of work. The debate here is twofold. One, do we think helping people through tough times is such a priority that we ought to pay for it, which we think you ought to. It's a higher priority than many things we spend money on. And secondly, what are we doing about getting them back to work? Helping them short term, need to do. What they really want is a job. So what are we doing here in Congress to actually encourage businesses to hire again? And so I think that debate is very healthy, but I hope every person listening today understands I've just not heard anyone saying this is a handout. If people feel that way, then I think it's sad, because members of Congress certainly don't.
The stimulus funds. I wanted to bring an item from the Washington Times this morning. House Democrats tap stimulus for schools. House Democrats on Wednesday proposed dipping into last year's economic stimulus to pay for part of a new round of education spending. The first time leaders in that chamber have proposed using what they had dubbed sacrosanct funds. This is from Stephen Dinan today. The cuts to the Recovery Act, which range from defense to the high-profile automobile cash for clunkers program, add up to only about $1.6 billion of the total. But symbolically, they represent a shift for Democrats who, for the last 16 months, had turned back every effort to redirect money from the $862 billion stimulus. Democrats said they are putting money into things that have become more urgent than they originally foresaw, and said that's different from Republican proposals to slash the stimulus spending to reduce the deficit.
I think it is the first stark admission from Democrats that the stimulus failed to jumpstart the economy or restore consumer confidence. And they see it now, unfortunately, like the bailout money, sort of a slush fund to use for whatever new project is coming down the road. And I think, the public has given up on the stimulus. Poll after poll after poll, people say, that money was wasted. It didn't go to real job creation. And now, Democrats are saying, yeah, for the most part, we agree. Let's spend it elsewhere. Our argument is it was never an economic stimulus. It was a political stimulus. Too much of the money was wasted. Most of the jobs were government jobs, which only last as long as taxpayers are willing to pay for it. And very little was done to spur real job creation. And now I think the Democrats agree.
Next phone call for Congressman Kevin Brady is from Kent, Ohio. Good morning to Dale. Dale's on our Democrats line.
Yes, good morning. Mr. Brady, I would just like to know, what do you think about the tax cuts? Do you think they should be extended from the big companies that are leaving this country in droves anyways? They're not the trickle-down voodoo economics. Do you really believe that's working? I mean, come on, look, Bush took over. We had money in the bank. We were finally, in the black, and all of a sudden, he gave out all this money the first year he was in there, and it's been downhill ever since.
Can I ask Kent what tax cuts for businesses you're referring to?
The tax cuts that Bush gave to all the rich people when he got in there, and they extended them. They're talking about stopping them, but I haven't seen them stop them yet. They're still getting their breaks. The big business is still getting their money, the oil companies and everybody else.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think this is a common misconception, Kent and others. One, there wasn't big tax cuts for big business. Almost 90-some% of the tax cuts went to middle-class working families. And if you end those tax cuts, it means Kent and Timothy and John, who all called in, their families will pay an average of $3,000 more to the federal government than they would if the cuts were extended. I don't think many families think they can afford that right now. And also, I'll point out Republicans actually lowered taxes for companies that create jobs here in America, that invest, that produce, that manufacture here in the United States, and they have a higher rate for those who do it overseas, which is exactly right. Unfortunately, House Democrats have proposed that the energy industry, which employs millions of people in America, pay taxes like they were creating jobs overseas, which is exactly what will happen. We'll send jobs overseas. So I think the Bush tax cuts absolutely ought to be extended, especially for families. To do so, to not extend them, will hurt our economy in a major way. It won't get these people back to work who are calling in and are so worried about it today.
I want to pass along a story from the Wall Street Journal this morning. As you all know, there's a bipartisan 18-member fiscal commission to look at the federal debt, and this story is from its meeting. Deficit panel stresses spending cuts. Democrats on a blue ribbon deficit reduction panel suggested that spending cuts would likely have to outweigh tax increases if the nation is to seriously tackle its ballooning financial obligations. This was from Erskine Bowles, who is the co-chair of the commission. While praising Democrats' health care overhaul for expanding access to services, Mr. Bowles also emphasized the need to find significant savings in federal health spending and other entitlement programs. If not, it will just consume the budget. I'm going to stop there for your comment.
Yeah, health care under the new report yesterday will double over the next decade or so, federal spending. So the bill itself never bent the cost curve, which was a big concern, is that we can never afford these health care costs. Federal level, it actually accelerated them, which is a huge problem from a debt standpoint. But it's true, you can't tax your way back to a balanced budget. We literally this year could double everyone's taxes in America, Susan. We'd still be running a deficit. And every study shows that at a certain point, you can only tax so much. People's behavior changes. And you've seen this in Europe, as a matter of fact. They tax so highly that people change their job creation, their income creation behavior, and you get less tax revenue. It's going to happen here in the United States. Historically, we're around 18 to 19% of GDP as tax revenue. Even if they continue to jack it up, businesses will adjust their hiring, people will adjust their income generating, and we're not going to see huge revenue. So it has to come back to spending, to tightening our belt. There's really no other choice.
Well, let me ask you specifically about two of the largest obligations, Social Security and also Medicare. Starting with Social Security, if in fact our obligations are greater than our ability to pay according to projections, what do you see as the likely outcome of that?
Social Security, I think, is easier to solve than Medicare and Medicaid by a factor of 10. And I think we're going to have to look, no question about it, we're going to have to look at everything from at what age do people retire, or more importantly, can we put in some incentives for people to work longer? Because you don't really get that big of a bump for staying in the workforce, and that's why the majority of people pick the age 62 to retire. One, they want the money now. Two, they're not sure Social Security is going to be there. We need to change that. Secondly, we have to find a way, and there's some good ideas, I think bipartisan ideas, on making that money go to work for younger workers. We're going to have to find a way where we don't just have a virtual Social Security account and count on promises in the future. We've got to allow workers to pool their money, to invest it in real assets, like state employee funds or teacher retirement funds, where it's real assets with real interest and real value over time will help a great deal.
Here's another one of those cat chasing your tail situations. In the last discussion, people were suggesting that workers should retire earlier because it helps finding new jobs in the economy.
Yeah, I tell you, this country is never good at gaming social behavior. You know what I mean? It just, most things Washington does ends up backfiring. I think if people understand that what they're paying into Social Security will actually be invested not in their government, in an IOU, but in real assets, and if they see advantages to working longer, saving more themselves, and businesses see value in creating and hiring new workers, then I think that goes a long way towards solving the problem.
Okay, we'll come back and talk more about Medicare after a couple more calls. Powell, Maryland. This is Tom on our independent line. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Susan. Please give me a minute. I have some cost-cutting measures I'd like to discuss with the good senator. For one thing, you senators and Congress, you only work about 100 days a year. Let's see y'all cut your salaries by about half. There's no place in the private sector out here that the American person can go to work and work about 8 years and draw retirement for the rest of their lives. You people need to work for the betterment of your country, and you don't need retirement. Like I say, about all of you are wealthy. You don't need your retirement. Stop that. Let's stop all foreign aid for maybe 2 or 3 years. Keep some of that money in this country to help the American people, not other countries all around the world. They don't need our help. They can get their own. Another thing, job creation. There are approximately 12 to 20 million illegal immigrants in this country. Let's deport all of them, and that will free up lots of the job market. That will probably, create millions of jobs for the American people. Get rid of the illegals. And let's see if the American people won't take some of these jobs that your great Mr. George Bush said they're only taking the jobs that Americans don't want.
Okay, Tom, go jump in there.
Well, with Powell there, there's a lot to jump in there on. First, I get the same emails at home that you do about congressional retirement and salaries, and unfortunately, they're all inaccurate. Members of Congress that I know work, I'd say, at least 6 days a week in our districts, and the retirement, thankfully, has been changed. It now is the same as federal workers. And I think 1.5 or 1.7% a year salary, so it's much more comparable to what it ought to be, not some of the luxurious ones that have been in place in the past, which is exactly, I think, the way the public wants it. But the point you made about foreign aid, I think people need to understand the severity of debt that Susan was talking about earlier today. We literally are borrowing 43 cents of every dollar we're spending as a federal government. think about that in your family. If you're borrowing almost half of everything you've earned each and every year, just what a terrible financial position that puts you in. Everything in the federal budget is going to have to shrink. For us to get back to a balanced budget, we're going to have to change our thinking dramatically about what the role of the federal government is, what are the priorities that people want to spend their money. I don't believe people can stomach more tax increases. I think they should be off the table, period. We ought to be looking at ways to cut taxes to spur the economy. But in spending every line item, every issue, we're going to have to figure out a way now in an urgent manner to cut this budget dramatically to get back to the point where we can, again, not just break even, but start paying back this horrible amount of debt that we're amassing.
Respond to this viewer who says President Clinton raised taxes, paid off the Reagan and Bush senior $9.5 trillion debt, and created 22 million jobs.
Well, one Republican Congress balanced the budget for 4 straight years. It didn't happen with Democrats and President Clinton. It happened with Republicans holding the purse strings that balanced the budget for 4 straight years until 9/11 hit. And actually, the tax increases hurt the economy during that decade. In fact, most of those jobs were created in the dot-com bubble that burst, like the real estate bubble that burst recently, and much of that was lost. The one thing I will note, that the top 1% of the wealthy in the United States were more prosperous under President Clinton than under President Bush, and President Bush actually taxed the top 1% more than President Clinton did. So I think some of those misperceptions about the Clinton years go away when you look at the facts.
Lufkin, Texas. Mike, Republican line. Good morning. You're on for Congressman Brady.
Good morning. Well,
Morning.
I haven't been on hold a while. There's so many different things that get touched, but it does seem that we're looking at the idea of just big philosophy differences. One thing you talked about tax increase, I think if we really had to literally, by law, had to sign a check after every paycheck, write the check to the federal government rather than have it pulled out so we never see it, actually have to write that check and send it off, I think we'd all feel this more. Secondly, we're not really good on short-term versus long-term. Even these people that are unemployed and getting benefits, I feel for them. I don't know what I'd do if I was in their shoes.
Yeah.
But there is still a chance they don't recognize that as our debt goes up, and then they finally get that second job, like the one lady said, and it's not going to pay as well, they're going to have to pay back for themselves, and so their money doesn't go as far. So it is a vicious cycle, and it seems to be a philosophy thing that we're going to have to quit spending more money than we make. In our own personal finances, if we were in this kind of debt, we would never get out of it. And we're going to burden the people behind us so much that we cannot get out of this. We're going to have to stop this vicious cycle.
Yeah, we do, Mike. Thank you. People have often proposed, I think actually it's a great idea, that, how would Congress act if Election Day was April 16th of every year? Would they handle the tax and spending differently? I think they would if Congress was held and the President was held far more accountable for these decisions. But on the job standpoint, the decisions up in Washington really do matter. We know in Lufkin, for example, where you live, and in Texas, we're facing job losses already as a result of this drilling moratorium, which was very hastily done. I think an overreaction to the oil spill. I had breakfast with a woman last week who's already lost her job because of the moratorium, because companies are already taking their rigs to West Africa, redeploying them to the Middle East. Companies are laying off workers because what business can go 6 months without any revenue and survive? Not many. It's one of the reasons where I think the federal judge was right to end that moratorium. The White House is intent, or seems to be intent, on reinstating it, but we're going to see job losses somewhere between 50,000 to 100,000 as a direct result of that moratorium. A $2 billion loss in wages is going to make the economy worse. So the decisions that Congress and Washington consider and make have a real impact on the Mikes of the world back home.
Wall Street Journal this morning, Laura Meckler. Polling shows that federal spending is of increasing importance to voters. A June Wall Street Journal NBC News poll found that 34% of Americans would be enthusiastic if a candidate for Congress supported cuts in federal spending, the most popular attribute on a list of more than a dozen options given during the poll. I want to put that out as I ask this question on behalf of Diane in Vale, New Hampshire, who says the costs of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq were kept off the books during the Bush administration. Those costs were put back on the public record once President Obama took office. She asks, how does this return to the reality of federal spending impact on the public perception of the national deficit?
Actually, they weren't put back on the books. In fact, this week we're still debating another war emergency supplemental, which means simply that we're going to allocate another $30 billion to fund our troops, which is the right thing to do, but it won't be paid for. So that hasn't changed between administrations. But the public perception is, at least back home, I can't pretend to speak for the rest of the country, but jobs, spending, the Obama health care plan is what people talk to me most about each day, but what keeps them awake is the spending at all levels, in all ways, and they just don't. I think one of the reasons the approval rating for Congress and the President is so low is that the public understands this spending has to end, that someone's got to get a handle on it across the board, and it's one of the reasons we're driving consumer confidence down.
Next caller is Adrian, Democrats line, Oakland, California.
Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Adrian.
Just want to say that I'm a paying taxpayer, just like everyone else who's called on this program. I feel like nothing's getting done in Congress. You guys take more days off than any average Joe or Jane in America. You guys need to really stick to your guns, go and do the people's business, and take care of this issue. This issue is happening here in California. It's happening in Michigan. It's happening there in your home state of Texas. I feel like people need these benefits because they need to be taken care of because of no fault of their own. They're unemployed. I understand that we have this debt issue, and like you said, we do need to take care of it, and we need to stop the exorbitant amount of spending, but this issue is a compassionate issue, and it needs to be taken care of.
Adrian, can I ask you this? Adrian, can I ask this? Because California is struggling with a huge deficit at the state level as well, but do you think Washington could find other spending less important than unemployment benefits to pay for it?
Yes, I do. I really feel like congressional members could take a pay cut. I feel that we, as one caller said, we could reduce our foreign aid. We do give a lot of aid out to several countries, but when we need their help in regards to, for instance, this BP oil spill, we have to borrow their resources and pay them back. But we've always given out money to them, and that's fine. I understand that's who we are as Americans. I'm a proud American. I'm a patriot. I serve this country. But I feel that Congress, they need to do their job. They need to get to work for the American people, and this issue needs to be taken care of.
Thanks, Adrian.
I agree with you. I think of a $3 trillion budget, if we can't find spending that's more wasteful, less important than unemployment, we're not doing our jobs. That's our point. Let's find the money and pay for this. Let's get it done.
A small detail I wanted to find out, since you're from a Gulf Coast state. He said that we're now bringing foreign countries in to help with the Gulf cleanup, but he said we have to borrow the resources and pay these countries back. Is that true?
You know, I don't know the details of it. I just saw the announcement yesterday. I know there's been offers on the table for a while for equipment to come in, certain types of skimmers and all that would be real helpful in protecting the beaches and the marshes. I don't know how the repayment on that is handled, but I know who ought to pay for it, BP, and not taxpayers.
Yesterday, President Obama was in Racine, Wisconsin. We have some video of that. Some of the news reportings call it a campaign-style event. The Wall Street Journal reporting on it today. Cutting debt will be our project. That's quotes from the president yesterday. And Laura Meckler writes, President Barack Obama said Wednesday the rising national debt is a real and legitimate concern and that the nation must reorder its priorities to gain control over federal spending. But the president offered no specific ideas for how to tackle the budget problem. Mr. Obama says he thinks it can be done, but it must be done in a gradual way so that people are not hurt. He was not specific beyond that. This is going to be our project for the next couple of years, he said. Your comments, please.
Oh, it's going to be our project for the next couple of decades because we're so deep in debt. And I listen to the President's words carefully. I notice he didn't say cutting spending is our project. The worry I think many people have is that the President believes the best way to cut the debt is simply to raise taxes. Tax people more, tax businesses more, tax job creators more. And we are already an overtaxed nation. It's hurt us economically, and we're not able to compete around the world. And so I think it sort of tips off his thinking that this debt commission and his proposals in the future are all going to be about tax increases versus cutting wasteful spending.
Fran Godici, Oswego, New York, asks, would you ask your guests if the fair tax bill would solve many of these problems?
You know, I'm a co-sponsor, in full disclosure, co-sponsor of the fair tax, which is a national retail sales tax that would replace the income tax for families and businesses, do away with the death tax, the gift tax, a number of excise taxes. I really think our tax code is just a horrible drag on our economy and on people. I would love to get the IRS out of our lives once and for all. And I think if we're going to do real reform, you know, a retail sales tax that's paid one time, the first time that product is bought, would be the best for us. For a lot of people, that's a huge change. You know, that's a transition I'm not sure everyone quite can get their arms around. The other proposals, like a flat income tax, is better than what we have today. But my worry is, still got the IRS deep in your lives. Congress can still do the exemptions, the loopholes underneath the surface that people don't see, and then usually those flat taxes grow and grow back into what they were before. So I would love to have a national debate where the average people can say, look, let's look at keeping the tax code is today, a flat tax or a fair tax. Let's decide what's the best for us. I think we had a discussion for a full year as a country. I think at the end of the day, the fair tax would be the choice.
Camdenton, Missouri. Judy, Independent Line. Good morning.
Good morning. Obama is sending $2 billion to Brazil for oil drilling, and the Democrats, they did not stop Wall Street from getting their bonuses. Why wasn't that used for unemployment? And no one wants people to lose their jobs, but this country is bankrupt, people, and the government cannot continue unlimited unemployment. And I know of two young people, both capable of working, but they would rather not work because they can make more money drawing off of our taxes. And one's been on unemployment for over 18 months, and they just keep drawing it and drawing it. And so, you know, the government could find the money. Look at the just ridiculous bonuses that Wall Street got, and I'd like to hear comments on that.
Well, I think, bottom line, the government can find the money for the unemployment benefits. $33 billion, that's real money. And I think it's in our budget to find it. The stimulus money, you know, again, only half of that's been spent. You know, stop spending that. The interest savings alone on stopping the stimulus today or very soon, just the interest payments and savings would pay for the unemployment benefits. There are a number of areas that I think we could trim to get to the $33 to $34 billion for this bill. That's at the heart of the matter. People want to help people who are out of work, but they want to add the debt, and they want to get the economy going.
This viewer asks a specific, wanting to know why you voted against H.R. 5297, passed the House just last week, in the Senate, that would lend money to small businesses.
Debt, again. The bill wasn't paid for. It was mainly lending through the SBA and using, I think, TARP money, again, to do lending at the local level. Two problems. One, the TARP has become a slush fund for any social program available in Washington. I think that's wrong. It needs to be ended long ago, so this didn't happen. And secondly, this is why Washington gets things wrong. They're convinced people aren't lending back home, aren't getting credit because there's not enough money locally. Banks have the money to lend. Two things are happening. One, federal regulators saying commercial real estate loans, commercial loans. Our problem loans don't do it. Local banks are punished when they do. So they're reluctant to make that loan. Secondly, small businesses, they don't go to the SBA. I mean, I think 1 out of 100 are every touched by the SBA. They go to their local bank. And small businesses aren't hiring. They're not buying that new piece of equipment. They're not bringing on that new worker because they tell me they are frightened by cap and trade, new regulation. They're worried about the health care costs, worried about all the new tax increases that hit them. Many small businesses file as individuals. And so they're part of the horses that are frightened. And so, you know, another government program paid for by TARP funds isn't going to solve the problem and adds to the debt. So no, proud to vote against that.
Last caller's from Tampa. This is Merle on the Republican line. Good morning.
Thank you, Susan. Good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to go back to what the one that came in and he was talking about the fair tax. I think there's several good reasons that we really need to talk about it. The Congressman Levin in the Ways and Means Committee will not even allow H.R. 25 and S.R. 25 to come out and be discussed on the floor. That's a shame because a lot of the folks that call in and say they've lost their jobs, they can't get unemployment, they really don't understand what the tax system works against them, that they've got these problems. They don't see it. I always tell people, anything that creates a $13 trillion offshore money to go out because of the tax code, that alone should get that thing out of the Ways and Means Committee so the American people can see it untaxes the poor up to the poverty level. There's not a person calling in that says Obama's helping them with this and that. President Obama should be behind it 1,000%. And I, for the life of me, don't understand on the Ways and Means Committee why you can't get Levin to let that out of there so it can honestly be discussed. And I'd sure appreciate your input on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Merle. I would love to see it brought to committee and have this full debate and a vote on it on the fair tax, on tax reform, period. And I think people understand how bad the tax code is to them. I don't think everyone understands just how anti-competitive it is, how much it drags down our economy, and how other countries have really exploited our horrible tax code, you know, to beat us in competing for jobs. And unfortunately, the White House and Congress has a number of new proposals that will kill companies that are competing around the world to not just buy American, but to sell American products and services, how much damage that will do. So I'm with Merle. The sooner we get a vote, the better.
I mentioned earlier that we would talk about Medicare, but you called it complex, and we're out of time. So if you want to give us a very brief, or we can save it for another visit.
Let's save it because it takes some time, but clearly it is the 800-pound gorilla of Medicare and Medicaid, and we're going to have to change people's roles. I think people want to have more choices in Medicare and Medicaid. They want to have some say in the quality of the care, but the cost of it as well. They feel too much of it is wasted, and they point out, you know, you could save money by doing this, by doing that, by doing this. We need to empower them to help us stretch that Medicare dollar much farther.
Thank you for being here this morning.
Thanks, Susan.
Congressman Kevin Brady of Texas. Our next guest of the morning, John Tierney, Democrat of Massachusetts and a member of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, to talk to us about a new report that he asked for that looks at contracting costs in Afghanistan, what it's doing to the safety of our troops and also the